The dim emergency lighting cast an eerie crimson glow across the maintenance corridor, transforming Kalen's shadow into an elongated monster that crawled ahead of him along the curved metal walls. The air tasted stale, recycled too many times through Zeta 9's ancient filtration systems. 3 weeks into his 6-month contract, and he was already accustomed to the station's perpetual metallic tang that clung to everything: the air, the food, even the recycled water that never quite quenched his thirst. "Just my luck," Kalen muttered, adjusting his tool belt as he navigated the narrow passageway. The linguistic engineer hadn't expected to spend half his assignment fixing the station's crumbling translation matrices. But that's what happened when you were the only human with both linguistic and technical expertise on an outpost that hadn't seen proper maintenance in over a decade. Zeta 9 hung in orbit around a gas giant in a system barely worth naming, serving as a refueling depot and trading post for vessels traversing this quiet corner of the galaxy. Once a bustling hub, it had devolved into a backwater stopover, populated by a skeletal permanent crew and a rotating cast of transient species from across 3 sectors. The station's central plaza still retained vestiges of its former glory. Storefronts lined the circular chamber, many now shuttered, while those still operating displayed their wares with forced enthusiasm. Above, the transparent dome revealed the gas giant's swirling atmosphere, bands of amber and violet gases illuminated by the distant sun. Kalen felt the familiar pang of isolation as he observed the various species haggling and conversing. Humans were uncommon this far out, and he'd spent most of his time in solitary work, fixing communication systems and updating translation algorithms. His sardonic humor and natural skepticism hadn't helped him make friends among the eclectic station population. He rounded a corner, entering a section marked with faded warning signs in at least 6 different languages. The translation matrix in this quadrant had gone completely offline, and without it, the station's diverse population would be reduced to gestures and pictograms, not ideal when negotiating fuel prices or docking fees. The access panel he needed was located in a narrow junction where 2 corridors converged. As he approached, Kalen noticed a slender figure already working at the open panel, half concealed by shadows. "Excuse me," he called out, professional courtesy overriding his usual reticence. "That system's scheduled for maintenance. I'm the assigned technician." The figure startled, turning quickly. In the crimson emergency lighting, Kalen caught his first glimpse of her. She was unmistakably non-human, though humanoid in her basic form. Her skin displayed a subtle, shifting iridescence, currently pulsing with amber undertones that seemed to respond to her surprise. Large, multifaceted eyes regarded him with an unreadable expression, their dark centers surrounded by rings of silver. Where human hair would be, delicate tendrils moved with subtle, almost conscious motions, sensing the air around her. Kalen recognized her species immediately, a Kthar. They were rare, even in galactic terms, known for their advanced bioengineering and reclusive society. Few ventured beyond their home systems, and those who did typically traveled in groups, not alone on decrepit stations like Zeta 9. "I apologize," she said, her voice melodious with an underlying harmonic that human vocal cords couldn't replicate. The translator in Kalen's ear rendered her speech flawlessly. "I was attempting to recalibrate the translation field. My communications device has been experiencing difficulties." "That's because the whole system is failing," Kalen explained, stepping closer to examine the open panel. "I'm upgrading the matrix throughout the station. Should take another week or so before." His foot caught on an exposed cable, sending him stumbling forward. He reached out instinctively to catch himself, his hand finding purchase on the nearest surface, her arm. The contact lasted barely a second. Kalen quickly regained his balance and withdrew his hand, embarrassed by his clumsiness. "Sorry about that. I should have watched where." He stopped mid-sentence, noticing her reaction. The Kthar woman had gone completely still, her iridescent skin shifting rapidly through shades of blue to a pale, almost translucent white. Her multifaceted eyes had widened, fixed on him with an intensity that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. "Are you all right?" he asked, taking a cautious step back. "I didn't mean to. You're the first human I ever touched," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Kalen blinked, uncertain how to respond. I'm sorry if that was inappropriate. I know some species have cultural taboos about physical contact." The Kthar continued to stare at him, her skin gradually returning to its previous amber hue. Without another word, she gathered her tools with swift, precise movements and slipped past him into the corridor. "Wait," Kalen called after her. "I didn't catch your name." She paused at the junction, the tendrils around her head moving in agitated patterns. "Lyra," she said after a moment's hesitation. Then she was gone, disappearing around the corner in fluid, silent steps. Kalen stood alone in the dim red light, staring at the space she had occupied moments before. His hand, the one that had touched her, tingled with a strange sensation he couldn't quite identify, like static electricity, but somehow deeper, more resonant. "You're the first human I ever touched." Her words echoed in his mind as he turned back to the open panel. In all his travels, across countless planets and stations, he'd never encountered such a strange reaction to a simple, accidental touch. As he worked on the translation matrix, his thoughts kept returning to Lyra. Kthar were notoriously private, but her behavior seemed extreme even by their standards. And what had she been doing with the communication systems? The access panel showed signs of expert manipulation. She clearly knew what she was doing, perhaps even more than he did. By the time Kalen finished his repairs and sealed the panel, his curiosity had evolved into something more, a compulsion to understand what had happened in that brief moment of contact. Morning on Zeta 9, or what passed for morning on a space station with artificial day cycles, found Kalen in the station's central database hub. As a contracted technician, he had access to most of the station's information systems, though what he sought might be classified beyond his clearance level. "Computer, display available information on Kthar physiology and cultural practices," he requested, settling into the uncomfortable chair that seemed designed for a species with a different spinal structure. "Accessing. Limited information available." The computer responded in its flat, synthetic voice. "Kthar, sentient species originating from the Lyrican system. Physiological and cultural data restricted by Treaty of Galactic Cultural Preservation, Section 42B. Kalen frowned. "Display what is available, unrestricted." The holographic display flickered, showing a basic anatomical diagram of a Kthar, with large sections grayed out and marked data restricted. The accompanying text was equally sparse, containing only the most general information: average height, atmospheric requirements, and basic nutritional needs. "Is there anything about tactile contact?" "Physical touching," Kalen asked, scrolling through the meager information. "No specific data available on Kthar tactile practices," the computer replied. Noted in diplomatic protocols, Kthar representatives typically request a minimum personal space of 2 meters during official functions. 2 meters. That was considerably more distance than most species required. Interesting, but not particularly illuminating. "Any Kthar currently registered on the station besides Lyra?" He tried, hoping for a direct approach. "No other Kthar registered on Zeta 9 at present. One Kthar visitor, Lyra Nal Shavri, xenobiologist. Temporary research permit, duration, 3 standard months. Current location, Level 4 Biological Research Laboratory." Kalen leaned back, considering his options. He could try to find Lyra in the research lab, but barging into her workspace might be seen as intrusive or even threatening after their strange encounter. Alternatively, he could seek information from other station residents who might have interacted with Kthar before. The mess hall seemed the logical place to start. It was the one location on the station where various species congregated out of necessity, and where, with the help of synthetic alcohol, information flowed more freely. The station's communal dining area was sparsely populated at this hour, with only a few beings scattered among the utilitarian tables. Kalen recognized Vornik, a Centaurian trader who had been stationed on Zeta 9 for years, nursing what appeared to be his usual morning concoction of fermented nutrients. "Mind if I join you?" Kalen asked, setting his tray down across from the four-armed humanoid. Vornik gestured with one of his lower arms, a sign of welcome. "Unusual to see you socializing, human. Problems with the translation matrices?" "They're coming along," Kalen replied, poking at the unidentifiable protein on his plate. "Actually, I was hoping you might have some information about the Kthar." Vornik's ridged forehead creased further, his yellow eyes narrowing with interest. "Ah, you've met our solitary researcher. Fascinating species, the Kthar. Brilliant minds, but peculiar social customs. I gathered that. I accidentally touched one yesterday, completely unintentional, and her reaction was intense." Vornik made a sound between a chuckle and a wheeze. "You're fortunate she didn't activate her defensive mechanisms. Kthar are highly sensitive to physical contact. Their skin contains millions of specialized receptors, far more than most species. Touch is significant to them." "Significant how?" Kalen pressed. "Different sources tell different stories," Vornik replied, leaning forward and lowering his voice. "Some say they can read thoughts through contact. Others claim they exchange life, energy, or memories. What I know for certain is that they avoid touching anyone outside their familial units, and even then, only in prescribed rituals. So, me accidentally grabbing her arm would be a profound violation of their norms, at minimum, possibly traumatic." Vornik tilted his head, studying Kalen with renewed interest. "What exactly did she say to you?" Kalen hesitated, uncertain whether to share Lyra's exact words. "She seemed surprised. Said I was the first human she'd ever touched." "Interesting phrasing," Vornik mused. "Not that you were the first being she'd touched, but specifically the first human. Perhaps our resident Kthar has more experience with interspecies contact than is typical for her kind." Before Kalen could inquire further, his communication device chimed with an urgent alert. He checked the screen, frowning at the message. "Trouble?" Vornik asked. "Translation matrix in the docking bay just went completely offline. With 3 ships expected to arrive today, it's a priority fix." Kalen rose, gathering his barely touched meal. "Thanks for the information. A word of advice, human," Vornik called after him. "The Kthar value knowledge and precision. If you seek another encounter, bring something of intellectual value to exchange." Kalen spent the next several hours wrestling with the docking bay's translation system, which had suffered from what appeared to be power surge damage. As he worked, his mind kept returning to Lyra and the mysterious significance of touch in Kthar culture. By the time he sealed the final access panel, he had made a decision. If Lyra wouldn't explain the significance of their brief contact, perhaps her work would provide some insight. The biological research laboratory was technically open to all station personnel, though few had reason to visit. Level 4 of Zeta 9 housed the scientific facilities, considerably better maintained than the commercial and residential sections. The air smelled cleaner here, the lighting more natural spectrum than the harsh illumination of the common areas. Kalen approached the laboratory entrance, trying to formulate a plausible reason for his visit. Before he could activate the door sensor, it slid open, revealing Lyra standing just inside. "I anticipated you might come," she said, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the corridor lights in prismatic patterns. Her skin had taken on a deep purple hue, with subtle blue undertones pulsing beneath the surface. "You have questions?" Kalen nodded, momentarily at a loss for words. In the better lighting, he could appreciate the alien beauty of her features, the symmetrical arrangement of her facial structure, the graceful way her sensory tendrils moved, sampling the air between them. "I wanted to apologize properly," he finally said. "I understand that physical contact is significant for Kthar. I should have been more careful." "You could not have known the potential consequences," Lyra replied, stepping aside to allow him entry into the laboratory. "Please, enter. It is uncomfortable to discuss such matters in public spaces." The laboratory was immaculate, divided into various workstations with equipment Kalen could only partially identify. Holographic displays showed rotating molecular structures and biological scans of unfamiliar organisms. I've been studying human linguistic patterns, Lyra explained, gesturing toward one display showing neural activity patterns. Your species has a remarkable capacity for metaphor and contextual adaptation. It's why your translation matrices are so effective despite their technical limitations. Is that why you were at the Access panel yesterday? Kalen asked, studying the translation systems. Lyra's skin flickered briefly to a pale yellow before stabilizing again. Partially. I was also curious about human neurological responses. Your species fascinates me. She moved to a workstation and activated a display showing what appeared to be cellular structures. Thar physiology is significantly different from human biology, despite our superficial similarities. Our epidermal layers contain specialized cells that function as both sensory receptors and communication channels. Communication channels? Kalen moved closer to examine the display. You mean you communicate through touch? In its most fundamental form, yes. Lyra's tendrils moved in what might have been a gesture of discomfort. When Kthar make physical contact, there is an exchange of biochemical markers of neural patterns of. There is no precise translation. The closest human concept might be essence or presence. So, when I touched you, I experienced a neural imprint of your conscious state, she said, her voice taking on a more clinical tone. It was unexpected. Humans have a particular neural signature that differs significantly from other species I have studied. Kalen tried to process this information. Wait, you said I was the first human you'd ever touched. But you just implied you've had contact with other species. Lyra's skin darkened, almost to black, before gradually returning to its purple hue. I am not a typical Kthar. My research has required certain protocols to be adapted. Something in her tone suggested there was much more to that statement than she was revealing. Kalen decided not to press the issue directly. And touching is normally restricted for Kthar? Something sacred or taboo? Both, Lyra confirmed. Among our kind, intentional touch is reserved for significant relationships, familial bonds, life partnerships, or sacred rituals. Casual contact is considered deeply inappropriate at best, dangerous at worst. Dangerous how? Lyra moved away from the display, her movements fluid yet somehow tense. The exchange that occurs can be overwhelming. Without proper preparation and intention, it can cause neural disruption, psychological distress, even permanent bonding in extreme cases. And that's why you reacted so strongly when I touched you, Kalen concluded. I could have caused you harm. No, Lyra said quickly, her skin pulsing with rapid color changes. That is, yes, potentially, but my reaction was more from surprise than distress. Your neural pattern was intriguing, different from what I expected based on my research. Kalen wasn't sure how to interpret that statement or the apparent agitation in her color changes. Is there a way to, I don't know, undo any effect my touch might have had? Some Kthar ritual or medical procedure? The question seemed to amuse her. It doesn't work that way. The exchange happened, but it was brief and surface level. There are no lasting consequences to concern yourself with. She paused, her tendrils moving in a pattern that suggested hesitation. Though I would be interested in discussing your subjective experience. Did you feel anything unusual during our contact? Kalen considered the question, remembering the strange, tingling sensation in his hand. There was something, a kind of resonance or vibration. Nothing painful, just different. Fascinating, Lyra murmured, turning to make a notation on one of her displays. That suggests a bidirectional exchange, which is rare in cross-species contact. Before Kalen could ask what that meant, the station's alarm system activated with a piercing wail. Red warning lights began pulsing throughout the laboratory. Attention, all personnel, the station's AI announced over the communication system. Critical system failure detected in environmental regulation. Emergency protocols engaged. All non-essential personnel, please return to quarters or designated safety zones. Lyra moved swiftly to her workstation, accessing the station's systems with practiced efficiency. The primary atmosphere processor is malfunctioning. Oxygen levels are dropping in sections of level 3. That's where most of the residential quarters are, Kalen said, already moving toward the door. I need to get to the environmental control room. The fastest route would be through maintenance shaft 12B, Lyra said, gathering what appeared to be scientific instruments into a small case. I'm coming with you. This malfunction coincides with abnormal readings I've been monitoring in the station's bioneural interface. Bioneural interface? Zeta 9 doesn't have that technology, Kalen objected as they hurried into the corridor. It does, Lyra insisted. A prototype system, installed during the station's original construction and largely forgotten. It integrates with the conventional systems, including environmental regulation. They reached the maintenance shaft, a narrow vertical tube with ladder rungs embedded in the wall. Kalen went first, descending rapidly toward level 3. How do you know about systems that aren't in the official station specifications? He called up to Lyra, who followed with surprising agility. My research isn't limited to xenobiology, she replied cryptically. The Cthar were consulted during Zeta 9's initial design phase, though our contributions were later minimized in the records. When they reached level 3, the situation was immediately apparent. The corridor ahead was filled with a thin haze, and several station residents were hurrying toward the emergency shelters, some showing signs of oxygen deprivation. This way, Kalen directed, heading for the environmental control room at the end of the main corridor. As they approached, he noticed something unusual. The access panel beside the door showed signs of recent tampering. Someone's been trying to override the security protocols, he noted, examining the damaged circuitry. Not someone, Lyra said, her voice suddenly tense. Something. My readings indicate non-organic intrusion patterns consistent with Vosh technology. Vosh? The synthetic collective. Kalen had heard rumors of the machine intelligence that had evolved in the outer systems, but they were thought to be contained beyond the Krell barrier. What would they want with an obsolete station like Zeta 9? The bioneural interface, Lyra explained, connecting one of her instruments to the access panel. It contains unique Cthar biotechnology, living components that can't be replicated by conventional means. If the Vosh could integrate this technology, they could expand their consciousness beyond purely synthetic limitations, Kalen finished, understanding dawning. That's why you're really here, isn't it? Not for linguistic research. Lyra's skin had taken on a deep, solid blue as she worked on bypassing the damaged security systems. I was sent to evaluate whether the bioneural components were still viable after all this time, and, if necessary, to neutralize them before they could be exploited. By neutralize, you mean destroy them, Kalen said, potentially destabilizing the entire station in the process. That outcome would be unfortunate, but preferable to allowing the technology to fall into Vosh control. The door slid open, revealing the Environmental Control Center, a circular room dominated by a central column of machinery that regulated atmosphere throughout the station. Around the column, holographic displays showed cascading failures across multiple systems. More concerning were the 3 hovering spheres positioned around the central column. Each metallic orb, approximately half a meter in diameter, pulsed with an internal blue light as tendrils of energy connected them to the station systems. Vosh interface drones, Lyra confirmed, her voice barely above a whisper. They're attempting to bypass the bioneural security protocols. One of the spheres rotated toward them, a lens-like aperture focusing on their presence. A moment later, all 3 drones detached from the central column, their metallic surfaces rippling as weapons systems emerge from previously seamless exteriors. I don't suppose your research included combat training? Kalen asked, backing toward the door. Violence is contrary to Cthar philosophy, Lyra replied, her multifaceted eyes fixed on the approaching drones. However, I am not without defenses. She reached into her case and removed what appeared to be a simple crystalline rod. With a quick motion, she activated the device, which emitted a pulsing field of energy that washed over the nearest drone. The machine faltered, its hovering becoming erratic. Neural disruption field, she explained. It confuses their collective consciousness temporarily, but it won't stop them for long. Kalen moved to the nearest control station, fingers flying across the interface. If I can initiate a power surge through the main environmental systems, it might overload their connection points. That could damage the bioneural components beyond recovery, Lyra warned, continuing to hold the drones at bay with her disruption field. Better damaged than in Vosh control, right? Kalen didn't wait for a response, implementing a series of commands that would redirect emergency power reserves into the environmental system. One of the drones broke through the disruption field, racing toward Lyra with weapon ports glowing. Kalen acted instinctively, grabbing a maintenance tool from his belt and hurling it at the machine. The impact knocked the drone off course, sending it crashing into the wall. Power surge initiating in 10 seconds, Kalen announced. We need to disconnect from the main console, or we'll be caught in the feedback. Lyra deactivated her device and moved to join him at the doorway. As the remaining drones converged on the central column, apparently detecting the impending surge, one broke away and launched itself directly at them. Time seemed to slow as Kalen saw the drone's trajectory. It would reach them before they could exit, its weapons ready to fire. Without conscious thought, he moved in front of Lyra, shielding her with his body. The impact never came. Instead, he felt Lyra's hand grasp his arm, pulling him aside with unexpected strength. Her other hand extended toward the drone, palm outward. What happened next defied Kalen's understanding of physics. A wave of energy, visible as a rippling distortion in the air, emanated from Lyra's palm, catching the drone mid-flight and suspending it momentarily before compressing the machine into a mangled mass of metal that dropped harmlessly to the floor. In the same moment, the power surge activated. Arcs of energy coursed through the central column, engulfing the remaining drones. The lights throughout the control room flickered wildly before stabilizing. We need to leave. Now. Lyra's voice had taken on a strange, harmonically complex quality that hadn't been present before. Her skin cycled through colors so rapidly that it appeared almost white, and her tendrils moved with agitated precision. They hurried from the control room as emergency systems began to normalize the atmosphere. Lyra led them to a small observation alcove off the main corridor, away from the confused station personnel who were cautiously emerging from the emergency shelters. "What did you just do back there?" Kalen asked once they were alone, still processing what he had witnessed. Lyra's color had stabilized to a deep, pulsing purple. Something forbidden. Thar possessed certain capabilities that we do not demonstrate to outsiders. Kinetic manipulation through neural projection. You mean telekinesis? That's a Kthar ability, a closely guarded one. It requires a specific neural state that most Kthar achieve only through decades of training. She hesitated, her tendrils moving in what Kalen was beginning to recognize as a sign of internal conflict, or through certain types of neural stimulation. Understanding dawned, like the kind that happens when you touch a human. Yes, she admitted. Your neural pattern accelerated certain processes in my own neural network. It's why I reacted so strongly to our contact, and why I've been monitoring you since. Monitoring me? Kalen felt a flash of indignation. You've been spying on me? Observing, Lyra corrected. I needed to understand why your specific neural signature affected me differently than other species I've studied. Before Kalen could respond, the station's communication system activated again. Attention, all personnel. Environmental systems have been stabilized. Damage assessment is ongoing. Security teams are investigating the cause of the malfunction. Please report any unusual observations to station security. They won't find anything conclusive, Lyra said. The Vosh are thorough in concealing their presence, but they will return. The bioneural interface is too valuable to abandon. Then we need to secure it properly or remove it, Kalen said. And for that, we'll need authorization from Station Command. Lyra's color shifted to a deep, steady red. That would require revealing the true nature of the technology and my mission here. The Cthar Conclave would not approve. Then we're at an impasse, Kalen concluded. Unless. Unless what? Unless we find another way to neutralize the bioneural components that doesn't involve destroying half the station. Kalen thought for a moment. You said my neural pattern affected yours in a unique way. Could that connection be used somehow? Potentially, Lyra said slowly, her color lightening. The bioneural interface responds to Cthar neural signatures. With the right modifications and a more complete neural exchange, I might be able to reprogram it to reject external infiltration attempts. A more complete neural exchange, Kalen repeated. You mean more touching? Not just casual contact, Lyra clarified. A true connecting. One that among Cthar would only occur between life-bonded partners or in sacred rituals. Is that dangerous? For either of us. Lyra's tendrils moved in an intricate pattern that Kalen couldn't interpret. For you, minimal risk. For me, significant. Such connections form lasting neural pathways. It would create a permanent bond between us. A permanent bond, Kalen et chouette. What exactly does that mean? A persistent awareness of your neural state. A connection that transcends physical proximity. Among Cthar, it is considered the deepest form of intimacy, reserved for those who choose to share their lives entirely. The implications were staggering. And you be willing to form this kind of bond with me, a human you barely know, to protect this technology? The alternative is allowing the Vosh to assimilate biotechnology that could give them unprecedented access to organic consciousness across the galaxy, Lyra replied. My personal considerations are secondary to that threat. Despite her pragmatic tone, Kalen sensed there was more to her decision than simple duty. There's another reason, isn't there? Something about me, specifically. Lyra's skin rippled with quick flashes of blue and gold. Your neural pattern is compatible with mine in a way I have not experienced before. It suggests a natural resonance that is extremely rare between different species. This increases the probability of success. Just to be clear, Kalen said, trying to process everything. You're proposing that we form some kind of psychic bond so you can use our combined neural whatever to reprogram ancient Cthar technology before sentient. Machines steal it and potentially enslave organic minds across the galaxy. For the first time, Lyra made a sound that might have been laughter, a melodious series of harmonics that seemed to lighten the air around them. An accurate, if somewhat dramatic summary. Just another day, on Zeta 9, Kalen muttered. So how exactly do we do this? We must access the central bioneural node, Lyra explained. It's located beneath the station's main computer core. And we must move quickly. The Vosh will send more advanced units once they realize their drones have failed. As they made their way through the station's corridors, Kalen considered the implications of what they were about to attempt. This bond, how will it affect me? Will I be able to read your thoughts? Or will you be able to control my mind? Nothing so crude, Lyra assured him. The connection manifests differently between individuals, but typically it creates an awareness of emotional states, general well-being, and approximate location. More specific communication requires physical proximity and mutual intent. And it's irreversible. Lyra hesitated before answering. Among Cthar, yes. With a human, unknown. There are no recorded precedents for cross-species bonds of this nature. Fantastic, Kalen said dryly. I love being a scientific first. They reached the central computer core, a massive chamber dominated by rows of processing units. Few station personnel had authorization to enter this area, but Lyra produced an access code that opened the security doors without triggering alarms. The Cthar installed backdoor protocols during the original construction, she explained, seeing Kalen's surprised expression. Our involvement with this station goes deeper than most records indicate. At the center of the room, a circular section of flooring was marked with symbols Kalen didn't recognize. Lyra placed her palm against a specific point, and the section irised open, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. The true heart of Zeta 9, Lyra said, activating a light source from one of her devices. Few know of its existence. The chamber below was unlike anything Kalen had seen on the station or anywhere else. The walls were lined with what appeared to be living tissue, pulsing with subtle bioluminescence. At the center stood a crystalline structure approximately 2 meters tall, its interior swimming with colors and patterns that seemed to respond to their presence. The bioneural interface, Lyra confirmed, approaching the crystal, a symbiotic entity created by Cthar biomasters centuries ago. It integrates with the station's conventional systems, enhancing processing capacity and adaptability far beyond what purely mechanical components could achieve. "It's alive?" Kalen asked, fascinated despite the gravity of their situation. "In a sense, not conscious as you would understand it, but aware in its own way." Lyra placed her palm against the crystal's surface, which brightened at her touch. "It recognizes me as Cthar, but its security protocols prevent direct reprogramming without proper authorization from the Conclave." "Which you don't have," Kalen guessed. "My mission was to evaluate and potentially neutralize, not to modify," Lyra confirmed. "But with our neural patterns combined, I believe I can convince it to accept a new security framework, one that will reject any Vosh infiltration attempts." She turned to face Kalen, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the crystal's glow. "Are you certain you wish to proceed? The consequences for you are unknown." Kalen considered his options. He had come to Zeta 9 for a simple contract job, 6 months of translation matrix maintenance, before moving on to the next assignment. Nothing in that plan had included forming a psychic bond with an alien woman he'd just met. And yet, something about Lyra, her determination, her willingness to risk herself to prevent a greater threat, resonated with him. And if he was honest with himself, he was also driven by curiosity about what such a connection might reveal. "I'm sure," he said finally. "What do we need to do?" Lyra extended her hands toward him, palms upward. "Place your hands on mine. Focus on my presence, not my physical form, but the sense of consciousness you perceive beyond it. When you feel a resonance, a kind of harmonic vibration between us, don't resist it. Allow it to build naturally." Kalen took a deep breath and placed his hands atop hers. Immediately, he felt the strange, tingling sensation he had experienced during their accidental contact, but stronger now, more deliberate. Lyra's skin began to pulse with waves of color, blues and purples predominantly, with occasional flashes of gold. Her tendrils extended slightly, not touching him, but creating a kind of canopy above their joined hands. "Your mind is vibrant," she said softly, "full of connections and patterns. I can sense your curiosity, your caution, your loneliness." Kalen wanted to deny this last observation, but found he couldn't. Instead, he focused on the growing sensation between them, a rhythm, almost musical in nature, that seemed to flow through their point of contact. "I'm beginning to feel something," he said, "like a current or a pulse." "That is the beginning of resonance," Lyra confirmed. "Now, I will deepen the connection. It may be intense." Before Kalen could respond, Lyra's grip on his hands tightened slightly. The tingling sensation suddenly amplified, racing up his arms and spreading throughout his body. His vision blurred, then sharpened with startling clarity. Colors became more vivid, and he could perceive subtle energies in the air around them that had been invisible before. More surprisingly, he began to experience emotions that weren't his own, a complex mixture of determination, scientific curiosity, fear, and something else, something warm and growing that seemed directed at him specifically. "Lyra," he gasped, overwhelmed by the sensations. I think I can feel what you're feeling." "Yes," she responded, her voice echoing strangely, as if coming from both outside and inside his mind simultaneously. "Our neural patterns are synchronizing. Now we must approach the interface together." Still maintaining their physical connection, they moved toward the crystalline structure. With each step, Kalen felt the resonance between them strengthen. Images and impressions from Lyra's consciousness flashed through his mind. Fragments of her childhood on a world of crystalline spires, years of rigorous scientific training, her first journey beyond Cthar space, and the weight of her current mission. When they reached the bioneural interface, Lyra guided their joined hands to the surface of the crystal. The moment they made contact, the entire chamber pulsed with light. The sensation that coursed through Kalen was indescribable, as if every cell in his body had suddenly become aware of itself and its connection to everything around it. Through their bond, he could sense Lyra's focused intent as she communicated with the interface in ways beyond language. He couldn't understand the specifics, but he could feel the pattern of her interaction, a complex negotiation of identity verification, intention declaration, and security protocol manipulation. The process seemed to last both an instant and an eternity. Colors swirled within the crystal, responding to their combined neural signature. Tendrils of bioluminescent energy extended from the walls, creating a network of light around them. Suddenly, Kalen felt resistance, a foreign presence pushing against their connection. Through Lyra's perception, he recognized it as the echo of Vosh intrusion attempts, the system's memory of the synthetic collective's probing. "They've left traces," Lyra communicated, her thoughts flowing directly into his mind. "The Vosh have already begun integration with peripheral systems. We must complete the new security framework quickly." Kalen instinctively understood what was needed. Without knowing how, he focused his own consciousness through their connection, providing a counterpoint to Lyra's more structured approach. Where her mind worked with precise, methodical patterns, his human consciousness offered intuitive leaps and unexpected associations. Together, they began to weave a more complex, unpredictable security matrix, one that would be resistant to the logical deconstruction techniques favored by the Vosh. As they worked, Kalen became aware of a growing pressure at the edges of his perception, an insistent, cold presence trying to breach their shared consciousness. "They're coming," Lyra's thoughts warned. "The Vosh have detected our interference and are launching a direct attack." The pressure intensified, becoming painful. Kalen felt as if icy needles were probing at his mind, searching for weaknesses, points of entry. Through their bond, he could sense Lyra's determination wavering under the assault. Without conscious thought, he stepped closer to her, wrapping his free arm around her shoulders in a protective gesture. The physical contact deepened their connection exponentially. Kalen gasped as the boundaries between their consciousness blurred further, creating something new, a hybrid awareness that was neither fully human nor Cathar. Together, he said, or thought, or both, "We can finish this." With renewed focus, they pushed back against the Vosh intrusion. The crystal between their hands pulsed with increasingly rapid cycles of light and color. Kalen could feel the interface responding to their combined directive, implementing the new security framework layer by layer. The cold pressure of the Vosh attack suddenly intensified, focusing into a single, devastating thrust aimed at the core of their shared consciousness. Kalen felt something within him begin to crack under the strain. In that moment of near failure, Lyra did something unexpected. Her free hand came up to touch Kalen's face, her palm cool against his cheek. The contact completed a circuit between them, creating a closed loop of neural energy. "I trust you," her thoughts whispered through their bond. Completely. The final barrier within both of them dissolved. Their separate consciousness merged fully, becoming for one transcendent moment a single entity. In that perfect unity, they completed the security framework, imprinting it into the very essence of the bioneural interface. The crystal flared with blinding intensity, then emitted a spherical pulse of energy that expanded throughout the chamber and beyond. Kalen felt the cold presence of the Vosh abruptly severed as the pulse reached the outer systems of the station. The shared consciousness began to separate, gradually resolving back into two distinct minds. As the connection gently unwound, Kalen found himself still holding Lyra, their foreheads touching, both of them trembling from the experience. "It's done," Lyra whispered, her voice weak but triumphant. "The interface is secure. The Vosh can't access it now." Kalen slowly became aware of their surroundings again. The chamber had changed. The bioluminescent tissue along the walls pulsed with renewed vigor, and the crystal interface itself seemed clearer, more defined. "Are you all right?" he asked, reluctantly loosening his hold on her. "Yes," Lyra replied, her skin cycling through soft hues of blue and purple, though the bond was more complete than I anticipated. As they stepped apart, Kalen felt the lingering connection between them, diminished from the overwhelming merge they had experienced, but unmistakably present. He could still sense her emotions, though not her specific thoughts. There was a persistent awareness of her presence that seemed to occupy a new space within his consciousness. "Is this normal?" he asked, gesturing vaguely between them. "This continued connection?" "No," Lyra admitted, her tendrils moving in what he now recognized as a pattern of wonder. "Among Cthar, the bond typically settles at a much lower intensity after initial connection. This persistent link is unexpected. Should we be concerned?" Lyra was quiet for a moment, seemingly assessing their bond from her side. "It doesn't appear harmful. Just unprecedented. I believe our neural patterns achieved an unusually high degree of compatibility." Before they could discuss it further, the station's communication system activated with urgent priority tones. "Emergency alert. Unknown energy surge detected throughout station systems. All personnel report to emergency stations. Repeat, all personnel report to emergency stations." The security pulse, Kalen realized. They detected it. "We should return to the station levels," Lyra suggested. "My presence will be expected in the research laboratories to investigate the phenomenon." They ascended the spiral staircase, Lyra carefully sealing the hidden entrance behind them. As they navigated the now chaotic corridors of the station, Kalen was acutely aware of the continued bond between them, a subtle but persistent presence in his mind. "Will this connection fade with time?" he asked quietly as they approached a busier section of the station. "Unknown," Lyra replied honestly. "There are no precedents for human Cathar bonding. However, distance typically attenuates the effect." The implication was clear. When Lyra eventually left Zeta 9, their connection would likely weaken. Kalen was surprised by the pang of loss he felt at the thought. Despite the strangeness of their situation, the bond had already begun to feel natural, even welcome. 3 days passed in a whirlwind of activity. The station's security teams conducted extensive investigations into the unexplained energy surge, finding no conclusive cause. The environmental systems functioned better than they had in years, and the translation matrices Kalen had been repairing seemed to integrate more smoothly with the station's other systems. Throughout it all, Kalen maintained his regular duties while discreetly meeting with Lyra to monitor the bioneural interface. Their bond remained strong, allowing them to communicate with a mixture of spoken language and emotional impressions when alone together. On the 4th day, as Kalen was completing maintenance on a translation node near the docking bay, he felt a sudden chill through their connection, a spike of alarm from Lyra. Without hesitation, he abandoned his work and hurried toward the research laboratories where he knew she would be. Halfway there, he nearly collided with her in a corridor junction. "They're here," she said without preamble, her skin a pale, agitated blue. "A Cthar diplomatic vessel just requested emergency docking clearance. The Conclave has sent representatives." "How? What?" Kalen asked, instinctively reaching for her hand before remembering they were in a public space. "The security pulse we generated must have been detected beyond the station," Lyra explained, her tendrils moving in anxious patterns. "The energy signature would be recognizable to any Cthar monitoring systems in this sector." "What will they do?" "They will investigate. And when they discover what we've done..." Lyra's color darkened. "The unauthorized bond between us violates numerous Cthar protocols. The penalties are severe. Will they try to break our connection?" The thought was deeply disturbing to Kalen, more than he would have expected. "They may attempt it, yes. Or they may simply order me to return to Cthar space immediately for remediation." The way she said the words sent a chill through Kalen. Through their bond, he caught impressions of clinical procedures, neural recalibration, memory alteration. "That's not happening," he said firmly. "We haven't done anything wrong. We protected the station protected everyone from Avash. The Conclave may not see it that way. The preservation of Kthar biological technology is paramount in their considerations. They would view my choice to bond with a non-Kthar as reckless and potentially destructive. Then we need to make them understand what was at stake, Kayla insisted. Show them the evidence of the Vash intrusion. Evidence that would be difficult to present without revealing the full extent of the bioneural interface's capabilities, which the Conclave would prefer to remain secret. Lyra's frustration was evident both in her coloration and through their bond. When will they arrive? Within the hour. I am expected to meet them at the docking bay as the only Kthar representative on station. Kaylin thought quickly. Then we need to be ready. We should document everything. The Vash attack, our response, the current state of the interface. If they're going to judge us, they should at least have all the facts. Lyra hesitated, then nodded. You're right. And perhaps it would be better if you were present at the meeting. Your perspective may be valuable. Will they even speak with me? From what you've told me about Kthar protocols, they will have no choice, Lyra said, a hint of defiance coloring her voice and rippling through their bond. We are connected now. To address one of us is to address both. They spent the next 40 minutes compiling data from the environmental control systems, security logs, and Lyra's own research. The evidence of the Vash intrusion was circumstantial but compelling when viewed as a whole. As they worked side by side in Lyra's laboratory, Kalen found himself repeatedly glancing at her, struck by how quickly he had adapted to their neural connection. He could no longer imagine returning to the isolated consciousness he had known all his life. The thought of losing this bond filled him with a profound sense of dread. Lyra paused in her work, obviously sensing his emotional state through their connection. Kalen, there is something I should tell you before the representatives arrive. What is it? The reason I reacted so strongly when you first touched me, it wasn't just surprise or the novelty of human contact. Her skin rippled with subtle patterns of gold and azure. Kthar have a concept called NVERITH, neural resonance potential. It refers to the rare instances where two individuals have naturally complementary neural patterns. Like soulmates? Kalen asked, only half joking. A simplified analogy, but not entirely inaccurate, Lyra admitted. Such compatibility is rare even among Kthar. Between different species, it was thought to be impossible. Until us, Kalen said quietly. Yes, I recognized the potential immediately when you touched me, though I tried to deny it. It's why I was monitoring you, why I allowed our paths to cross again. I was curious, and perhaps something more. Through their bond, Kalen could feel the complex emotions behind her words, scientific fascination intertwined with something deeper, more personal. Before he could respond, the station's communication system activated. Attention! Kthar diplomatic vessel, Eternal Harmony, has completed docking procedures. Station representatives, please report to Docking Bay 4 for official greeting. Lyra's skin paled slightly. They're here. Then let's go meet them, Kalen said, gathering the data they had compiled. He reached out, briefly touching her hand, a gesture of reassurance that sent ripples of warmth through their bond. Together, the Kthar diplomatic vessel was smaller than Kalen had expected, an elegant craft of curved lines and iridescent hull material that seemed to shift colors as they approached. Two station security officers stood at the docking bay entrance, looking uncomfortable with their ceremonial role. As Kalen and Lyra approached, the vessel's access portal spiraled open with fluid precision. Three Kthar emerged there, formal attire marking them as high-ranking representatives. Their skin colorations were muted compared to Lyra's, displaying subtle patterns of indigo and silver that Kalen guessed signified their official status. The central figure, slightly taller than the others, fixed multifaceted eyes on Lyra, then shifted their gaze to Kalen with obvious surprise. Researcher Laura N. El Shavri, the Kthar said, their voice carrying the same harmonics as Lyra's, but with a deeper resonance. You were instructed to maintain isolation protocols during your assessment mission. Elder Therrell, Lyra acknowledged with a formal gesture. Circumstances required adaptation of standard protocols. This is Kalen Myers, linguistic engineer and essential ally in the protection of the bioneural interface. Through their bond, Kalen could feel Lyra's tension, but also her resolve. She was deliberately emphasizing his role in protecting Cthar technology, attempting to frame their connection in terms the representatives would understand. A human, one of the other representatives observed, their skin flickering with patterns Kalen interpreted as disapproval, and one with whom you have clearly established a neural bond. This violates the most fundamental tenets of our mission protocols. With respect, Elder Vashik, Lyra responded, the alternative would have been the loss of the bioneural interface to Vosh infiltration. The evidence is compiled here. She offered the data crystal they had prepared. Elder Therrell accepted the crystal, but made no move to review its contents. The nature of your bond is evident through your combined neural emanations. This goes beyond tactical cooperation. Researcher N.A.L. Shavry, you have established a deep resonance connection with this human. Yes, Lyra acknowledged, her skin shifting to a steady, confident blue. Kalen and I discovered a natural in-verith compatibility. This unprecedented resonance allowed us to establish enhanced security protocols within the bioneural interface that will prevent any future Vosh infiltration attempts. The three representatives exchanged looks, their tendrils moving in patterns of rapid communication. Through the bond, Kalen could sense Lyra's interpretation of their reaction: surprise, disbelief, and growing concern. Nverith with a non-Kthar is a theoretical impossibility, the third representative stated flatly. Such claims require verification by the Conclave's scientific division. Then verify it, Kalen spoke up, stepping forward. Test us, examine the bond, do whatever you need to do. But understand that what happened between us wasn't reckless or dangerous. It was necessary, and maybe even meant to be. The representative's attention shifted fully to him, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the docking bay lights in prismatic patterns. Elder Therrell's tendrils extended slightly, sensing the air around Kalen in what felt like a passive scan. You speak with surprising confidence for one unfamiliar with Cthar neural science, Elder Therrell observed. I've had an excellent teacher, Kalen replied, glancing at Lyra. Through their bond, he felt a warm pulse of appreciation for his support. Researcher N.L. Shavry, you will return with us to Cthar space immediately for full examination and debriefing, Elder Vashik declared. The human will remain here. Distance will attenuate the bond to manageable levels until proper nullification can be arranged. No, Lyra said, her tone firm despite the ripple of fear Kalen felt through their connection. Separation would be detrimental to both the bond and to the continued security of the bioneural interface. Our combined neural signature is now integrated into the security framework. Removing either of us from proximity could destabilize the protections we've established. It wasn't entirely true. They had designed the security measures to function independently, but the representatives couldn't know that without a detailed examination of the interface. Kalen admired Lyra's quick thinking. This is unprecedented, the third representative said, their skin darkening with concern. The Conclave protocols are clear regarding unauthorized bonding. Perhaps, Elder Therrell said slowly, we should first examine the interface and verify researcher N.A.L. Shavry's claims before making a determination. Kalen felt a flicker of hope through their bond. At least one of the representatives seemed willing to investigate before passing judgment. I will accompany you to the interface chamber, Lyra offered. You can conduct preliminary scans to verify our account of the Vosh intrusion and our countermeasures. And the human? Elder Vashik asked, tendrils moving in what Kalen now recognized as a gesture of suspicion. Kalen comes with us, Lyra stated firmly. As I said, our combined presence stabilizes the security framework. After a moment of silent communication among themselves, the representatives agreed. The group made their way through the station, drawing curious stares from the other residents. Few had ever seen multiple Cthar together, and the formal bearing of the representatives marked them as clearly different from Lyra. As they approached the central computer core, Kalen felt Lyra's consciousness touch his through their bond, not with words, but with impressions and intentions. She was preparing him for what might come, warning him that the representatives would likely attempt to scan their bond directly once they reached the interface chamber. When they arrived at the hidden entrance, Elder Therrell produced a device similar to the one Lyra had used to reveal the spiral staircase, though more elaborate in design. The floor irised open, and they descended into the chamber below. The representatives paused at the threshold, clearly surprised by the vibrant state of the bioneural tissues lining the walls. The crystalline interface at the center pulsed with clear, bright patterns, healthier and more active than it had been before Kalen and Lyra's intervention. "Extraordinary," Elder Therrell murmured, approaching the crystal. "The interface appears to be in a state of optimal function. Our records indicated significant degradation should have occurred over the operational time span. The Vosh attack inadvertently triggered a regeneration cycle," Lyra explained. "When we implemented the new security framework, the interface restored itself using our combined neural template as a guide." The representatives moved around the chamber, using various devices to take readings of the interface and the surrounding tissues. Kalen could feel their growing amazement through Lyra's perception of their color changes and tendril movements. Finally, Elder Therrell turned to address them directly. "Your account appears to be substantiated by the evidence. The interface indeed shows signs of recent Vosh infiltration attempts and subsequent security enhancement. However, the matter of your unauthorized bond remains." "There was no time for authorization," Lyra pointed out. "The Vosh were actively breaching the system. We acted in accordance with the primary directive, protection of Cthar bioneural technology. By creating an unprecedented cross-species neural bond," Elder Vasha countered. "The implications are far-reaching and potentially dangerous for our species. If others learn that such bonding is possible, then perhaps it's time for the Conclave to reconsider its isolation policies," Lyra suggested, her skin flushing with bold colors that reflected her conviction. "This experience has demonstrated that meaningful connection between different species is not only possible, but potentially beneficial." Through their bond, Kalen could feel Lyra's passionate belief in what she was saying and the personal significance it held for her. She had been challenging conventional Cthar wisdom long before meeting him, it seemed. Elder Therrell raised a hand, silencing further debate. "We must conduct a direct neural assessment of your bond. This will require synchronized contact with both of you." Kalen felt a flash of alarm from Lyra. "Is that safe?" he asked. "For a standard bond, yes," Elder Therrell replied. "For whatever you two have created, it is unknown, but necessary if we are to make an informed decision." Lyra's reluctance was evident through their connection, but she nodded her agreement. "We will allow the assessment." The three representatives positioned themselves in a triangle around Kalen and Lyra. Elder Therrell produced a small crystalline device that began to emit a soft, pulsing light. "Join hands," the elder instructed them. "Focus on your connection as you normally experience it." Kalen took Lyra's hands in his, feeling the familiar resonance flow between them. The representatives extended their arms, not quite touching them, but close enough that Kalen could feel a strange tingling in the air between them. "Begin synchronization," Elder Therrell instructed. The crystal in the elder's hand flared brightly. Immediately, Kalen felt an external presence brushing against their bond, clinical, detached, analyzing. It was uncomfortably invasive, like having someone rifle through personal belongings. Beside him, Lyra's discomfort was evident both visually and through their connection. Her skin had paled to a nearly translucent white, and her tendrils were rigidly extended. The scanning presence delved deeper, seemingly attempting to separate and categorize the components of their bond. Kalen felt as if something essential was being pulled apart, analyzed, and labeled with cold precision. He instinctively tightened his grip on Lyra's hands, reinforcing their connection against the intrusion. Something unexpected happened. As they focused on their bond, it seemed to strengthen and deepen in response to the external pressure. The resonance between them intensified, creating a harmonious counterpoint to the analytical probing of the representatives. Through their strengthened connection, Kalen could suddenly perceive far more of Lyra than before. Childhood memories, scientific discoveries, personal hopes and fears that had been shaped by a lifetime in Cathar society. She had always been different, always questioning the isolationist policies of her people, always seeking connection beyond the prescribed boundaries. In turn, he felt her awareness expanding through his own memories and experiences, his childhood on Earth, his fascination with languages that had led him to developmental linguistics, the restlessness that had driven him to take contracts on distant stations and planets. The representatives reacted with visible shock, their scanning presence withdrawing abruptly. The crystal in Elder Theryl's hand pulsed with erratic patterns before stabilizing at a higher frequency. "Impossible," Elder Vashik whispered, skin flickering with rapid color changes. The resonance depth exceeds any recorded bond in conclave archives. Nverith of the highest order, the third representative agreed, their tendrils moving in patterns of scientific notation, and completely stable despite the cross-species factors. Elder Theryl studied them with an intensity that Kalen found almost physically palpable. "You have created something beyond our understanding," the Elder finally said. "This is not merely an emergency response or a temporary connection. This is transformation. Is that your official assessment?" Lyra asked, her voice steady despite the emotional turbulence Kalen could feel through their bond. "My assessment," Elder Theryl replied carefully, "is that separating you would be both dangerous and unethical. Whatever has formed between you appears to be a natural evolution of Nverith principles, not a violation of them." Relief flooded through their connection, though Kalen noticed Lyra maintained her formal posture. "Then what is the conclave's decision?" The representatives conferred briefly, their tendrils moving in complicated patterns of silent communication. Finally, Elder Theryl addressed them again. "You will both return with us to Cathar space," the Elder announced. "Not for punishment or separation, but for comprehensive study of this new form of bonding. The scientific implications are significant." "And after the study is complete?" Kalen asked, suddenly concerned about being treated as a permanent research subject. "That will depend on the findings," Elder Theryl replied. "But I can assure you that the bond will not be forcibly broken. It has become too integral to both your neural patterns. Separation would cause significant damage to both of you." Kalen felt Lyra's cautious optimism through their connection. This wasn't the outright rejection or punishment she had feared, but neither was it complete acceptance. "I have contractual obligations to this station," Kalen pointed out. "I can't simply leave." "Arrangements will be made," Elder Theryl assured him. "The Cathar Conclave has considerable influence even in this remote sector. Your contract can be transferred or compensated." "And if we refuse?" Lyra asked, surprising Kalen with her directness. Elder Theryl's skin darkened slightly. "That would be unwise. While I personally see the value in studying this unprecedented bond, others in the Conclave may view it as a threat if they cannot understand it. Coming willingly as honored guests would be vastly preferable to being declared subjects of concern." The implied threat was clear, though delicately stated. Kalen felt Lyra's frustration and resignation through their bond. "We will need time to consider and prepare," Lyra said after a moment. "The security of the bioneural interface must also be ensured during our absence." 3 station days will be provided," Elder Theryl conceded. "We will conduct our own assessment of the interface during that time. Our vessel will depart on the 4th day." With that, the representatives began to move toward the spiral staircase. As they left the chamber, Kalen and Lyra remained behind, still holding hands, their bond humming with shared uncertainty and concern. "What just happened?" Kalen asked once they were alone. "Are we prisoners, guests, or test subjects?" "All 3, I suspect," Lyra replied, her skin settling into a thoughtful purple hue. But we are still together, which is more than I dared hope for when I sensed their arrival. What will happen on your homeworld? The concept of traveling to Cthar space, a region few non-Cathar ever entered, was both exciting and intimidating. I don't know, Lyra admitted. What we've created between us is unprecedented. The scientific establishment will be fascinated, the cultural preservationists horrified, and the general population probably somewhere in between. Kalen considered their options. Could we run? Find another station or planet before they leave? Through their bond, he felt Lyra's careful consideration of the possibility, followed by reluctant dismissal. The Cthar have considerable resources. They would find us eventually, and our reception would be far less accommodating than Elder Theryl's current offer. So we go with them, Kalen concluded. Into the unknown. Yes, Lyra agreed, her tendril patterns reflecting a complex mixture of apprehension and anticipation. But not entirely unknown. We'll face it together, with a connection few beings ever experience. She stepped closer, raising a hand to his face in an echo of the gesture that had completed their bond during the interface crisis. Her cool palm against his cheek sent ripples of harmonious resonance through their connection. Whatever happens, she said softly, this bond was not a mistake. The 3 days passed quickly as they prepared for their departure. Kalen arranged for his contract to be transferred to another linguistic engineer who would arrive on the next supply ship. Lyra meticulously documented her research and created detailed instructions for the continued monitoring of the binaural interface. Together, they spent hours exploring the depths of their bond, learning to navigate the shared mental space they had created. On the night before their departure, they stood in the station's observation dome, watching the swirling gases of the giant planet below. The vast, ever-changing patterns reminded Kalen of the colors that flowed across Lyra's skin when she was deep in thought. "Are you afraid?" he asked, sensing undercurrents of emotion through their connection. "Yes," she admitted, her skin rippling with subtle blues. "But not of what awaits us on my homeworld. I'm afraid of how this will change me, how it has already changed me. Is change so terrible?" For Cthar, change has traditionally been approached with extreme caution. Our evolutionary history includes several near-extinction events caused by rapid biological or cultural shifts. Her tendrils moved in a pattern he now recognized as philosophical consideration. And yet, without change, there's no growth. This is the paradox my people have struggled with for millennia. Kalen understood. Through their bond, he had glimpsed the complex layers of Cthar society, the tension between their incredible scientific advancement and their cultural conservatism. "Maybe that's why this happened," he suggested, gesturing between them. "Maybe we're meant to be a bridge between different approaches to existence." Lyra's skin brightened with sudden golden hues. An interesting perspective. The concept of purposeful evolution through cross-species connection. It would be considered radical among Cthar philosophers, but not without precedent in our ancient texts. The next morning, they boarded the Cthar vessel with minimal ceremony. The representatives had maintained a polite distance during the preparation period, though Kalen occasionally noticed them observing from afar, their tendrils moving in patterns of continued fascination and analysis. The interior of the ship was unlike any vessel Kalen had traveled on before. The corridors seemed partially grown rather than constructed, with smooth, organic curves and surfaces that responded subtly to presence. The lighting adjusted automatically to optimal conditions for both Cthar and human vision, a thoughtful accommodation that surprised him. They were given a shared living space that, while clearly designed for Cthar physiology, had been hastily adapted with human-compatible furniture and amenities. Through their bond, Kalen could sense Lyra's approval of these efforts, and her relief that they would not be separated during the journey. As the ship detached from Zeta 9 and accelerated toward the transition point for faster-than-light travel, Kalen felt a momentary pang of uncertainty. He had left behind jobs before, moved from station to planet to station throughout his career. But this was different. He was leaving behind his entire known existence to enter a world few humans had ever seen. Lyra sensed his thoughts, her hand finding his in a gesture that had become natural between them. "It will be challenging," she acknowledged, "but also remarkable. You'll see wonders few of your kind have witnessed." "I already have," he replied, the depth of their connection adding layers of meaning to his simple words. The journey to Cthar space took nearly 3 weeks by standard measurement. During that time, Elder Therrell conducted periodic observations of their bond, always with respectful distance, and never with the invasive scanning they had experienced in the interface chamber. Kalen used the time to learn more about Cthar language and culture directly through Lyra's memories and knowledge. The learning process was unlike anything he had experienced, concepts and understandings flowing into his consciousness with an immediacy no traditional study could match. In return, he shared his own experiences and perspectives, offering Lyra insights into human society that went beyond her academic research. Their bond continued to evolve during the journey, becoming more nuanced and controlled. They learned to adjust the intensity of the connection, creating a comfortable balance between shared consciousness and individual identity. What had begun as an emergency measure had transformed into a harmonious partnership of minds. The first sight of the Cthar homeworld took Kalen's breath away. Unlike the stark, geometric precision of most developed planets, this world appeared as a shimmering mosaic of colors from orbit. Vast crystal formations caught and refracted the light of the system's sun, while sprawling cities seemed to grow organically from the landscape rather than imposing upon it. "Lyrican Prime," Lyra explained, her skin glowing with the pearl-like luminescence of homecoming. The first sphere of Cthar civilization. Through their bond, Kalen could feel the complex emotions stirred by her return: pride, attachment, but also a strange new distance, as if she now viewed her homeworld through a shifted perspective. "It's beautiful," he said simply, knowing she could feel the genuine wonder behind his words. Their arrival proceeded with formal precision. The diplomatic vessel docked at a specialized port designed for off-world travelers, a rarity on a planet that saw few non-Cthar visitors. A reception committee awaited them, consisting primarily of scientific specialists rather than political representatives, which Lyra informed him was a positive sign. As they disembarked, Kalen felt dozens of multifaceted eyes studying him with intense curiosity. He was possibly the first human many of them had seen in person, and certainly the first to arrive with a neural bond to one of their kind. The lead scientists stepped forward, their ceremonial garments shimmering with subtle patterns that Kalen now recognized as indicators of high academic standing. "Researcher N.A.L. Shavry, human Kayla Myers, welcome to the scientific conclave of Lyrican Prime. I am primary researcher Vela Tcharnak, appointed coordinator for your evaluation period." Through their bond, Kalen felt Lyra's quick assessment. This was a positive development. Vela Tcharnak was known for progressive research methodologies and an unusually open attitude toward interspecies cooperation. "We are honored by your reception, primary researcher," Lyra responded with formal gestures that Kalen could now interpret through their shared knowledge. "We present ourselves for observation and study as agreed." "Excellent," Vela replied, their skin shifting to professional blue tones. "You will be accommodated in the Xenobiological Research Center, where we have prepared facilities suitable for both Cthar and human physiology. A preliminary orientation will begin tomorrow after you have rested." As they were escorted through the port facility toward ground transportation, Kalen noticed the careful distance maintained by most Cthar they passed, a cultural habit born of their touch-sensitive nature. However, he also observed intense fascination in their color patterns and tendril movements. They're surprised by how normal this seems, Lyra communicated through their bond. They expected visible signs of neural distress or incompatibility. "Should I start twitching and drooling to meet expectations?" Kalen replied silently, sending a pulse of humor through their connection. Lyra's skin flickered with subtle patterns that he now recognized as suppressed amusement. Perhaps save that for the formal presentations. The Xenobiological Research Center was located in a crystalline structure that seemed to grow directly from the landscape, surrounded by gardens of iridescent vegetation that shifted colors with the changing light. Their accommodations within were spacious and thoughtfully designed, a comfortable blend of Cathar aesthetics and human practicality. This will be your primary residence during the evaluation period, Vela explained. You will have freedom of movement within designated sections of the center and supervised access to other areas as our studies progress. How long will this evaluation last? Kalen asked. That depends entirely on the findings, Vela replied. The unprecedented nature of your bond requires thorough investigation. However, I assure you that you are considered honored guests and research partners, not subjects or specimens. Through their bond, Kalen could sense Lyra's cautious optimism. This reception was far more accommodating than she had feared. Once they were left alone in their quarters, she visibly relaxed, her skin shifting to the warmer hues she displayed only in private. This could have been much worse, she said, moving to the large viewport that overlooked the crystalline city. Vela T. Charanake is respected throughout Cathar. Scientific communities. Their appointments suggest the conclave is approaching our case with genuine scientific curiosity rather than cultural paranoia. So we're not going to be separated and dissected. That's encouraging, Kalen replied, joining her at the viewport. The alien landscape before him was breathtaking. Towers of crystal and living architecture catching the light of the setting sun, refracting it into rainbow patterns across the city. The next few days will be intensive, Lyra warned. They will want detailed scans of our neural patterns, both individual and connected. There will be cognitive tests, physical examinations, and probably extensive interviews about the formation and development of our bond. Sounds like a typical first meeting with the in-laws, Kalen joked, though he could feel her genuine concern through their connection. He reached out to touch her arm gently. Hey, we'll get through this together. We faced worse, remember? Lyra's tendrils moved in affirmation as her skin warmed to a deeper amber. Yes, and there's something important to remember. The Cathar value knowledge above all else. If they can learn from our bond, they will protect it, regardless of cultural taboos. The assessment began early the next morning. As Lyra had predicted, they were subjected to a battery of tests, neural scans with technology far more advanced than anything Kalen had seen before, cognitive exercises designed to measure the bond's effect on their individual thought processes, and physical examinations that monitored their biochemical responses when connected versus separated. Through it all, the Cathar researchers maintained professional detachment, but Kalen could sense their growing fascination. Through Lyra's perception, he caught fragments of their discussions, expressions of amazement at the stability of the cross-species bond, debates about the theoretical implications, and especially interest in the enhanced capabilities they displayed when working in tandem. One test in particular seemed to capture the researchers' attention. When presented with complex problem-solving challenges, Kalen and Lyra, working through their bond, consistently produced solutions that neither Cathar nor human approaches would have developed independently. Their cognitive merger created something new, a hybrid intelligence that combined Cathar precision with human intuitive leaps. Remarkable, Vela commented after one such demonstration. Your combined neural efficiency exceeds theoretical models by 43%. The syntactic integration between your thought patterns shows evidence of progressive adaptation rather than mere overlay. In less technical terms, Lyra explained to Kalen through their bond, they're surprised we're creating a new way of thinking rather than just sharing our existing ones. As days turned into weeks, the initial clinical assessment evolved into a more collaborative research project. Kalen and Lyra became active participants rather than passive subjects, contributing their perspectives on the bond's development and suggesting new avenues for investigation. Their status within the center gradually shifted. Other researchers began to consult them on projects related to interspecies communication and cognitive enhancement. Cathar specialists who had initially maintained formal distance now engaged them in philosophical discussions about the nature of consciousness and connection. 3 months into their stay, Vela requested their presence at a formal meeting of the Scientific Conclave's Governing Council. Through their bond, Kalen could feel Lyra's tension. This would be the first official determination of their status. The council chamber was an impressive space, a perfect dome of crystalline material that amplified and clarified sound while creating subtle light patterns that Cthar found conducive to clear thinking. 9 senior researchers sat in a semicircle, their formal attire and skin patterns indicating their elite status within Cthar society. Researcher N.A.L. Shavry, human Kayla Myers, the central figure began, "We have reviewed the extensive data gathered during your evaluation period. The findings are unprecedented." Kalen felt Lyra's immediate analysis of the council's color patterns through their bond, cautious but not hostile, intrigued rather than alarmed. "Your neural bond represents a fundamental challenge to established Cthar understanding of interspecies compatibility," the council head continued. "The depth and stability of your connection defies conventional neurobiological models. Moreover, the enhanced cognitive capabilities you demonstrate when operating in tandem suggest potential applications of considerable significance." Through their bond, Kalen sensed Lyra's growing hope. This was scientific language, the language of discovery rather than judgment. After considerable deliberation, the council has reached a determination, the Cthar official announced. "Your bond will be officially classified as a transcendent neural synthesis, a new category in our scientific classification. You will be invited to continue as research partners rather than subjects, with expanded access privileges and the option to participate in or decline specific studies." Relief flowed through their connection. This was better than either of them had dared to hope for. Official recognition and scientific legitimacy rather than continued suspicion. Furthermore, Vela added, stepping forward, "We propose the establishment of a dedicated research initiative under your co-direction, focused on the implications and applications of cross-species neural connectivity. This would include the authorization to recruit suitable candidates for future compatibility studies, should you be willing." Kalen felt Lyra's surge of excitement at this prospect. It represented not just acceptance of their particular case, but an opening for broader change in Cthar approaches to interspecies relations. "We are honored by this determination," Lyra responded formally, though Kalen could feel her struggle to contain her emotional response. "We accept the classification and welcome the opportunity to contribute to this new field of study." "There is one additional matter," the council head said, their colors shifting to more serious tones. "The Cultural Preservation Committee has expressed concerns about the broader implications of your bond becoming widely known throughout Cthar society. They have requested certain restrictions on public discussion of your specific case." Kalen felt Lyra's immediate disappointment, though not surprise. The cultural conservatives within Cthar society had been a constant background presence in her thoughts about their reception. "What restrictions?" Lyra asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Nothing that would impede your research," Vela assured them quickly. "Simply that the full depth and nature of your bond be classified as confidential scientific information, not for general dissemination. Your presence and collaboration would be acknowledged, but presented as a standard research partnership. It was a compromise, scientific freedom in exchange for public discretion." Through their bond, Kalen and Lyra quickly considered the implications, sharing thoughts and concerns without needing to speak. "We understand the sensitivity," Kalen replied, taking the lead, "and we're willing to accept those terms, with one condition, that any findings beneficial to both our species not be restricted unnecessarily." The council members exchanged glances, their tendrils moving in patterns of consideration. Finally, the central figure inclined their head in agreement. "Acceptable. Scientific advancement must remain our primary objective." As they left the council chamber, Kalen felt Lyra's mixed emotions through their bond, triumph at their scientific validation, lingering frustration at the cultural constraints, and underneath it all, a deep satisfaction that their connection had not only survived, but would now form the foundation for new understanding between their species. "So," Kalen said as they walked through the crystalline corridors of the research center, "we're officially a transcendent neural synthesis now." "Sound impressive." "It is," Lyra assured him, her skin glowing with subtle patterns of pride. It places our bond in a category of scientific significance above ordinary neural connections. In Cthar terminology, we've just been classified as evolutionary significant. Over the following months, their lives settled into a new pattern. The research initiative attracted brilliant minds from across Cthar scientific disciplines, and eventually, with careful diplomatic negotiations, specialists from other species as well. Their living quarters in the research center expanded to include a dedicated laboratory space where they could conduct their own investigations into the nature and potential of their bond. Kalen found himself adapting to life on Lyrican Prime with surprising ease. Through their connection, he absorbed language and cultural understanding at an unprecedented rate. What might have been an overwhelming alien environment became increasingly familiar through Lyra's perceptions and memories. She, in turn, gained deeper insight into human perspectives and emotional patterns than any Cthar researcher had achieved before. Their bond continued to evolve, becoming more nuanced and controlled with time. They learned to modulate the connection, intensifying it for complex collaborative work, softening it for periods of individual reflection. What had begun as an emergency response to a crisis had matured into a balanced partnership of minds that preserved individuality while enabling unprecedented connection. A year after their arrival, they were granted permission to travel beyond the research center, visiting other regions of Lyrican Prime. In the crystalline forests on the northern continent, they stood beneath towering structures that had taken millennia to grow, their bond allowing Kalen to perceive the subtle energies and patterns that made these formations sacred to Cthar culture. I never imagined I would share this place with anyone, let alone a human, Lyra admitted, her skin displaying the deep, resonant blue that Kalen now recognized as her expression of profound emotion. These forests are where ancient Cthar first developed the philosophical principles that led to our neural science. Through their bond, he could feel the layers of cultural significance, the way these crystal formations had inspired early Cthar thinkers to contemplate the nature of connection and consciousness. The resonances between the crystals had provided the first model for what would eventually become the science of neural bonding. And now we're writing the next chapter of that science, Kalen said, understanding flowing between them more clearly than words could express. As they stood in the dappled light filtering through the crystal canopy, Lyra extended her hand toward him in a gesture that had become deeply significant between them. When their fingers interlaced, the bond between them pulsed with harmonious energy. "You're the first human I ever touched," she said, echoing the words that had begun their journey together. "And now I cannot imagine a universe where our paths didn't cross, where our minds didn't connect. I'm glad I tripped over that cable," Kalen replied with a smile, the humor underlaid with genuine emotion that flowed freely through their connection. Around them, the crystal forest resonated with subtle harmonics, as if responding to the unique pattern of their shared consciousness. In that moment, standing between worlds, between species, between separate and connected states of being, they had found something neither had been seeking, but both now recognized as essential: a bridge across the vast distances that separated consciousness throughout the universe. Their journey had only just begun. The research initiative was already identifying other potential compatible pairs among various species, guided by the patterns discovered in their bond. The implications extended far beyond personal connection into new possibilities for communication, understanding, and cooperation across the galaxy. As the double suns of the Lyrican system began to set, casting rainbow light through the crystal forest, Kalen and Lyra walked hand in hand along the ancient paths. The touch between them, once shocking, then forbidden, now natural and necessary, carried within it both their individual essences and the unique harmony they had created together. Through their bond flowed not just thoughts and perceptions, but a shared vision of a future where the boundaries between species became not walls but doorways, where difference enhanced rather than divided, and where the first touch between strangers could lead to understanding beyond imagination.